I would just encourage all parents to share identifications with their children, because it is so helpful. They then go, oh, that's why I found XYZ so difficult. And it can be such a sense of relief for children. That's why I can't sit on the carpet, mummy. That's why this, that's why that. It's just an understanding that they suddenly gain of themselves. And again, it allows them to work with their strengths and support their weaknesses.
Welcome to All Aboard, where we help parents navigate the ADHD journey. Whether you're right at the beginning, asking what now, or you've trodden this path for a while and you're wondering what's next, All Aboard is here for you. We'll bring you key information from expert interviews alongside parents sharing their real life lived experience to help you feel less alone. I'm Claire, and today we'll be talking to parent guest Sarah Dixon. Sarah is a mother of 2 girls, aged 10 and 12, both of whom are dyslexic and have ADHD, and her husband has also been identified with ADHD too. Sarah leads a local school support group for parents of neurodivergent children and has recently become a director and trustee of the Accessible Learning Foundation, a new charitable organisation focusing on early identification and support of those with neurodivergent conditions within the education, justice and business sectors. For the past 4 years, Sarah has been supporting her family, and today she shares her journey from the realisation her children thought differently through the identification stage to where they are now. Welcome aboard, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us today. So can you briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your children with ADHD?
I can indeed. I'm Sarah Dixon. I am a mother of 2 wonderful daughters who are aged 10 and 12, and a wife to a fabulous husband who also has ADHD. I live in London, and I've had careers in the legal sector, the property sector, and now I am working for a charitable organisation called the Accessible Learning Foundation, or ALF, which is all about supporting neurodivergent people.
Amazing. So, and what about your children then? If we get onto the specifics of the ADHD side of things, what were the first kind of signs and behaviours that made you suspect your children had ADHD?
So it's a very interesting question, because thinking back, and it does seem like quite a long time ago, I'm not sure I even knew what ADHD was, or maybe even had heard about it. So my eldest identification came off the back of her dyslexia assessment. So she, aged 8, went in, and the educational psychologist assessed her and then called us in and just said, she's severely dyslexic, and I also strongly suspect ADHD. So I think that was the first time I might have even heard that acronym. Obviously now, knowing so much more about it, I think I could have probably known when she was inside me before she was born. She was such an active child inside me. It was unbelievable. At sort of dinner parties with friends, I mean, people just used to stare at my stomach and just go, holy moly, what is going on in there? I mean, the movement was unbelievable. And very early on, she was very early to sit up, to crawl, to walk, and she was everywhere. She was just this bundle of energy, and we used to have to get out of the house at sort of by 7:30. And, her being my firstborn, you just thought, that's what children do. She's just very energetic. But as I say, I don't think I'd heard of ADHD. So I had no sort of, is this what other children are doing? Or is this what other parents are experiencing? Because it just was what we were experiencing. And that was that. I had no comparison. So the ADHD identification came off the back of the dyslexia one. And then it explains so much. She just constantly moves, and she couldn't really read aged 8. And that was heading into the COVID pandemic and online learning. And it was sort of watching that, her sort of experience and ability versus her cohort, that it became very obvious to me of her learning differences and her ability or lack of ability to concentrate, and how frustrating that was for her. So I did actually end up moving her from mainstream schooling into specialist schooling for 3 years. But it was very interesting. The educational psychologist said, great, it's amazing you're tackling her dyslexia, but if you don't also tackle or support her with her ADHD, she's not going to be able to learn because she really finds concentration very difficult. So then we went down all sorts of routes, sort of the environmental supporting side of it and the medication side. Well, then my husband got identified with ADHD on the back of my eldest. And then when COVID sort of came around again, so to speak, and I was online learning with my youngest, it was evident to me she also had it. Again, this real struggle to concentrate. And she loves dancing. So there was just a lot of dancing that went on and a lot of learning through dance that went on.
They sound very like my children. So my eldest, likewise, I swear, from the moment he was born and probably before, never stopped moving. Even when he was a baby, and you're carrying them around everywhere, he had this ability to make me move on his behalf when he couldn't yet do it independently. And my daughter, who is not yet diagnosed, but I keep a very close eye on her because I'm certain she's got ADHD, she dances non-stop. So that is a very familiar picture in my house. So how were you feeling then when you got those diagnoses? What were your initial kind of thoughts and responses? As you say, it wasn't something you were aware of before.
No, so the school they were at had been brilliant with the whole dyslexia identification. So that wasn't news to me, although I was sort of so naive and ignorant still in the sort of dyslexia field that I didn't really realise there was a scale. I just thought you were dyslexic or you weren't. But when they started using words like severe, I was like, okay. And then when sort of ADHD was brought into the picture, you're just like, that's another challenge. And it's a whole mixture of emotions you go through, isn't it? It's accepting that your feelings and accepting that your child thinks differently or has different challenges to other children. And it's thinking for them, they're going to find quite a lot of things, particularly during their schooling life, very challenging. And as a parent, you sort of automatically feel protective and you want to protect them and you just wish that they weren't going to face perhaps additional challenges. But obviously, additional challenges brings resilience and there are lots of positives that come from that. But I think as a parent, hearing all of that, it does take time to process and accept and be comfortable with it. Very quickly, I was into the medication conversation, which brings around other feelings because, my eldest was only 8 and you're like, ooh, medicating an 8-year-old, not sure how I feel about that. But I was just so keen to help in every way I can. And sort of talking to the psychiatrist about medication, it is amazing in that it is in your system for a certain number of hours only. If you had an adverse effect or whatever, you just stop taking it. It's not like an antidepressant, which you need to build up and then build down on. So I just thought, why wouldn't I give it a go? If we get an adverse reaction or anything, then we just stop it. But I did find it is a big hurdle, the whole medication decision. So there's just a lot going on, but we've been lucky on the medication front. It has been a complete game changer, lifesaver, and my children don't experience that many of the downsides. So I'm very thankful for it. But I'm also very thankful that I could go down the private route and I didn't have to wait years and years for an ADHD identification and medication. So I'm very grateful for that.
It's such a hard time, isn't it? Even if you're fortunate enough to be able to do it privately, you're still going through this huge learning curve where you are suddenly almost bombarded with all this different information and these decisions that you almost, I guess, quite quickly have to move through, one being, as you say, the option of medication. And I was exactly the same. I think I'm sure lots of people listening will feel that too, that there is that instinctive reaction to think, oh no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to, my thoughts were, I don't want to dull down my child. And actually, as you say, with a stimulant medication, it washes out super quickly. But albeit a certainly very personal journey from our experience, it has been a complete game changer as well, particularly in the classroom. I think it has really helps to level the playing field.
I think what it has allowed my children to do is just have the control, be able to make the decision, right, I need to sit down and I need to do my work. And it enables them to be able to think through problems, to actually use their brain as opposed to their brain fighting against them because they can't even sit still. So I've noticed it just removes that frustration that my children have felt. Okay, they don't enjoy doing homework. I'm not sure many children do, but they will sit down and they will do it. There's not that fight. It's just removed their, for me, it looks like they've removed the fight their brain was having against them. And it just gives them that sort of control.
You described it as a fight, and I think that's actually such a nice metaphor for what goes on in the brain, isn't it? This constant sort of almost rivalry between the two parts of the brain, not particularly working with each other. And I think medication is almost like one part of a toolkit, isn't it? So like putting on a pair of glasses, okay, so now my glasses are on and I've done that bit, like, okay, now I can move on to all the skills-based stuff and all the interventions and things that might then work alongside it.
Yeah, it just enables my daughter's brain to achieve their potential, really. So my children definitely find school difficult and learning hard, but they're bright, and on medication they're getting the results that they are capable of getting. And that's what I think has been so brilliant. I didn't used to use it on weekends, but it's a very open conversation, the medication one. And, I will now sit down with my youngest and I'll say, right, this is the homework we have this weekend. Would you like to take a pill or not? And she will say yes, or she'll say no. And the difference is unbelievable. And I just think from a sort of the whole parenting of it, if she isn't on medication, the fights that we end up having, even though I try and stay calm, because she can't sit down and do it. The concentration is just everywhere. Whereas if she's medicated, we get it done in half an hour. And it's a pleasant experience. We do it together. It's, so I think it's really helped. And it's helped with behaviour too, because it can be hard parenting a child. I think parenting full stop is hard, but I think parenting a child with ADHD does bring in other challenges and test patience, which I'm not sure I have enough of. But, it's not nice when you lose your patience, and it's not nice for the child either. But when they're on medication and it enables them to listen to your instructions, for example, you're not having to say them, or doesn't end up you losing their temper. They're not actually being told off as much. And it just leads for a much, I don't know really how to say it, but sort of easier, more pleasant, supportive sort of family life.
Yeah, happier, which is important, right?
But I think it's very important that medication, is not the answer for everyone. I appreciate that, and I really respect it. It is a decision, and I respect, the parents that don't want to try it. It is a very personal decision, and there is so much more. There are other environmental measures that you can look at. So nutrition, for example, we did a lot around that, and then just aids in the classroom. Those wobble cushions, those fidget toys. Although I sort of think sometimes the fidget toys, they end up concentrating more on them. I actually think a tiny bit of blue tack in your pencil case is ideal. But, there is so much more sitting at the front of a classroom. I just think the whole identification of ADHD and any neurodivergent condition is key. So if there is anybody listening that suspects, a learning difference within their child, I would strongly urge them to do the best they can to get that identified as early as they can. Because if you know what you're working with, you can work with it. And that can only benefit the child. As soon as I was told that my eldest had ADHD, I was like, oh, that's why she can't sit down. And that's why she can't listen or struggles to listen to instructions. And I was much more kinder to her because I realised it wasn't her fault. It wasn't that she was just being naughty or difficult or testing me. She actually struggled with certain aspects. And if you know that, you can adapt your parenting style. Like I always dream as a family of, having long Sunday lunches, us all sitting around the table chatting. I mean, my family have all finished their lunch by the time I sit down. And there is absolutely no point me saying, oh, let's all continue sitting down and having a chat, because they all just want to go and run around. And so I've just sort of put that dream to one side. It's like, well, that's not my family. We're going to have our nice chats going on a walk or dancing around the kitchen. But, I think if you just know about these things, you adapt your expectations, and you just sort of evolve as a family and stay in a sort of happier place.
It's so true, isn't it? It's about knowing your family and doing what's right for them and giving them the kind of support that they need. So perhaps on that, we could talk a little bit more about the education side of things. Obviously, that's something that you've touched on in terms of, your daughter's actual schooling and time spent within a kind of specialist school through to the changes and interventions in the classroom. So what accommodations or support have you found most beneficial for your children?
So I think a lot, and again, it comes back to your children being identified with it, is from the teachers, from the school. And this is something I'm immensely proud of. My youngest in particular really owns her neurodivergent conditions. So she's very proud, and so she should be, of being dyslexic and having ADHD. So, for example, at the beginning of an academic year, she will walk into the classroom and say to the teacher, I am dyslexic, I am ADHD, this is how I need to learn. I need to sit at the front of the classroom, and this is what really helps me. I find sitting on the floor, like when she was young and they did sort of carpet time, sitting on the floor cross-legged, I really can't do. So I think it's the children working with the teacher, or the teacher being aware and just understanding that your child learns differently, and hopefully they can then, and if they don't have the training, that's a whole different conversation. But if you need to, as a parent, saying, okay, if you have a piece of blue tack in the pencil case, that might help. She can just sit and play with it in her hands. Or things like brain breaks. So if you need something handed out, could you perhaps ask my child to hand out the maths books or whatever? And I do think it really helps. I think stand-up desks are another quite good idea. But I think it is alerting the teachers to the fact that your child learns differently, and you yourself knowing the various sort of tools and sharing them with the teacher, that you then can build up quite a good relationship, and it sort of makes it all go smoother.
Yeah, for them to help understand that. And I think then that almost goes back a step, doesn't it, to really underline, and you said this yourself a moment ago, but it's something that has echoed through almost every podcast I've recorded so far, and it's this early identification and people just really pressing on how unbelievably important it is, because the quicker you can identify, the quicker you can put these supports and interventions in place, many of which are actually quite simple and don't cost anything in a classroom. But if you can understand them, and then you can be that voice for your child, although your youngest sounds amazing, she can do it for herself. But to say to the teacher, actually, if you can do X, Y, and Z, this will make a big improvement for them.
And it is things like instructions. You need to give my children one instruction at a time. If I say, go upstairs and please get dressed and brush your teeth, neither of those things will happen. But if I say, go upstairs and brush your teeth, they probably will go upstairs and brush their teeth. But so it's things like that. If a teacher's going to stand at the front of the classroom and ask them to do 5 things, that's a nightmare for them. It's just knowing that, and it's very easy to adapt to it, but it's knowing that that's what you have to do.
Yeah, and creating the habit a little bit, because as you said, the example at home, I mean, I know better, and yet even at the weekend my daughter got herself into such a state because we were sort of trying to get her ready and out the door to go to a birthday party, and afterwards when she was calmer and we were talking about it, and she said it's too many instructions, and I know that I should know better, but you forget in those moments.
I just always sort of almost want to test it out. You're sort of like, do I still have to just be saying one thing at a time. Do you think we might now be able to manage two? No, we can't. Okay, so it's never going to change. And that's fine, but it's quite tiring. I find it quite tiring sometimes. But I think, another matter I really want to sort of touch on is, I'm going to call it labelling, but I don't like calling it labelling. I run a parent support group for parents of neurodivergent children at school. And what can come up time and time again is sort of labelling your child. And a lot of parents understandably get nervous about how they're going to share that identification with their child. So they've just been for an assessment. Yes, your child has ADHD, and they are scared and worried about sharing that information with their child because they don't want their child to feel different. I totally understand that. And it can be a really sort of nerve-wracking moment in a way. But I actually think that nervousness comes from you yourself accepting that about your child. And children are just amazing. And I would just encourage all parents to share identifications with their children, because it is so helpful. They then go, oh, that's why I found XYZ so difficult. And it can be such a sense of relief for children. That's why I can't sit on the carpet, mummy. That's why this, that's why that. It's just an understanding that they suddenly gain of themselves. And again, it allows them to work with their strengths and support their weaknesses and start to own it. So again, going back to my youngest, if she knows she's got ADHD and she finds sitting cross-legged on the carpet difficult, when it comes to circle time, she can say, do you mind if I sit on a chair instead? Amazing, problem solved. So there are so many wonderful books and ways that you explain things like this to your children. And I really would encourage all parents to share everything they can with their children about it, and for it to be really an open and positive conversation at home. We're always talking about it, and it is brilliant. And I'm almost, I don't know if jealous is the right word, but I think the way the world's moving, I think in the outside world, in the big wide world outside of school, having a neurodivergent condition is amazing. There are so many benefits and positives to being dyslexic, having ADHD, autistic, everything. And I'm sort of almost jealous in a way, but it's just managing my children through the antiquated education system that is the challenge.
Yeah, that is entirely the challenge. And when I talk to parents in my support group and I ask them the question, if you took school out of the equation, would you have an issue? They almost always answer no. And it's another reason why I think labelling, to use that term, is really important, because one, it helps your child, as you say, understand themselves and be kind to themselves about their brain and how that impacts the way they are every single day. But also it helps build their self-esteem, which ultimately leads to more positive outcomes for them. And even beyond that, I think it's about raising awareness and helping educating others, even their children's peers, if they start in an age appropriate way to really understand and own that, like you said, your daughters do, and feel proud of that, and they can talk about it in a way that makes sense to them, and they do so openly with their friends and then their friends' parents and within the teachers at the school and that kind of wider community, suddenly then we're very slowly starting to help more and more people understand neurodiversity and why certain accommodations are necessary and important.
Yeah, and just sort of normalise it, and it is actually very normal. I mean, the stats that are around shows that, you really are not alone. I mean, I think it's 1 in 8 children are neurodivergent. So, in classes of 30, that's almost 4 children. And it is really important. It's really important, and peer-to-peer support can be amazing. And if you have the confidence and you share that with your peers, so my eldest, who really couldn't read when she was at her mainstream school, if there was some sort of project, a group project, her peers knew her struggles and said, you do the drawing because you're an amazing artist, and we'll do all the writing. And that's just amazing. So she feels really valued for what she can do, and she knows that the others will have her back on the part that she struggles with.
Which is an incredible thing as well, right? Because it builds self-esteem there too. Because as you say, there's that value and that awareness that I have this amazing skill and it's not something that others can do, and I can contribute this. And then when we get through the school system and we're out in the big wide world, suddenly I feel good about myself and I know that I have all these amazing skills to be able to offer.
Yeah, it takes time and practice, but I think it is all about communicating the positives and being aware of the challenges, and so you can then support them.
So with the positives then, can you share a success story or a unique strength that have made you really proud of your girls with ADHD?
Yeah, so I think definitely my youngest sort of owning her neurodivergent conditions the way she does makes me immensely proud. The fact that she is totally open and really, really proud of having dyslexia and ADHD. It's amazing. So this with ALF, my new charitable organisation, even this morning on the walk to school, Mummy, I really want to come and talk at your next conference. And public speaking is something that I hate and fear with a passion. And the fact that, she's 10 and she wants to come and speak to an audience about it is just amazing. And, she really wants to sort of make a difference and quite rightly sees it as a real positive. With my eldest, and it's hard for me to separate the ADHD from the dyslexia because it's all one child, but she is amazing at thinking outside of the box. When I was involved in the property world, I was a property finder, and during Brexit, business was quite severely affected. And aged, I don't know how old she was, sort of 8, she said, "Oh, Mummy, why aren't you very busy at work at the moment?" And I said, "Oh, well, Brexit brings with it quite a lot of uncertainty, and clients don't like to buy property in uncertain times." And she said, "Oh, well, that's just silly, Mummy, because when it's certain, prices are going to go up." And it's like, yes, you're completely right. Do you want to come and tell everybody that?
You could do my job, please.
Yeah, and it's and with her, if we're sort of doing up a room in the house or something, I will always ask her opinion because she's amazing. Her sort of spatial awareness and the way things fit and work is just incredible. And just sort of all that dreadful verbal reasoning they do at school. I mean, there are some questions I just can't do, and she's straight on it. And there was an instant, again, when she was younger, and there was some sort of swing that was completely knotted in a tree, and she just marches out and goes, "This is how you do it." It's just amazing. And I just think there's so many positives from being neurodivergent and just so many benefits. And I just think in the world, particularly our children are going into, it should really only be seen as a positive. If they come out of school and they are still confident and they haven't been beaten down by the system, these children are going to fly because they have skills that you really can't teach. So I am immensely proud and slightly jealous of them, if I'm honest, and just hope I can support them to get through school.
Well, it sounds like you're doing an absolutely incredible job of that. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. I say the same thing. These are skills you cannot teach. So we need to keep that spark alive in our children. We need to not crush it so that they can get out into the world as adults and be the amazing human beings that we know that they are. On that note, what one piece of advice would you like to leave for parents listening to help them feel less alone on this ADHD journey?
So definitely, and we've talked about it a lot, is this early identification. If you are seeing learning differences or behavioural differences and you think they might have ADHD or any other neurodivergent condition, I would really urge you to try and get some sort of an identification so then you can put the right support in place. I'd also say, I think joining a support group, or even starting one up like both of us have, is incredible. It can be a really lonely journey as a parent, really lonely. And being a member of a support group is incredible because just for so many reasons, I can now walk into the school playground and instead of feeling how I used to feel, oh, my child's the only one that struggles, they're all getting top marks, just feeling different. I now walk in and it's all, and the people I've connected with it, we're all smiling at each other and it just feels like we're on this together. And also you just share knowledge, and that is so powerful. All these tips that we're learning ourselves, we share amongst ourselves, and that is just brilliant. You know, we've solved sleep problems on our group, we share information, we share articles, we share sort of specialist contacts. It's incredible. It's such a positive community to be part of. So I would definitely say join a support group, find support. You are not alone. And yeah, the sooner you know, the better. It definitely has its challenges, but it's such a rewarding experience, really.
Thank you, Sarah. That's such good advice. It is lonely. I think all of us have felt exceptionally alone on this journey. And as you say, people often, you then go on to kind of create these communities yourself when you can't find them or they're lacking. And that's really the point of this podcast. So I know that you sharing your story today so honestly will have helped so many people feel less alone, because there will be elements of your daughters and your experience that just ring so true for them. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for your work with the Accessible Learning Foundation as well, because I know that's going to make a huge difference for all our children too. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Claire.
If you'd like to learn more about the Accessible Learning Foundation, then please do check out our show notes below for more information. Or if you'd like to find out about how I can help support you and your children with personalised ADHD coaching, then please do head to allaboardadhd.com. You can also find me on Instagram at allaboardadhd. But most importantly, if you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please can you follow and review All Aboard to help other parents find this podcast and welcome them aboard our journey too. Thank you for listening to All Aboard.